What's up, Starcraft fans? Today we're doing the tier list for quick killers on Temple of the Past. Brian, let's hear the mutation.
Temple of the Past is the map where we have to protect a temple in the center of the map from waves of enemy units. If the temple survives until the end of the game, we win. If the enemies destroy the temple, we lose. Kill bots spawn from enemy buildings. You can't fight them, but they will fight you and will deactivate after destroying a preset number of your units. Enemies are faster. They are also stronger when heroic units are nearby.
So we have Pidgeot and Joni in the call with us today. How are you guys?
Yeah, good, thank you. Just,
I'm great.
This afternoon.
All right. So Joni, how do we rank the commanders this week?
So, I sort of the obvious problem with this mutator is killbots. Like they require dealing with. They can't be dealt with any other way other than like feeding or sort of a full clear, which fortunately on this map is pretty achievable with some caveats dependent on the commander. I think like the combination actually of sort of adding speed freaks in there, it makes inspiration something that you do need to worry about, because the reality is you're often on this map getting attacked from two sides, appreciating you've got an ally, but you know, not always a reliable one. So like mobility and like these enemy waves can get on top of you if they're not dealt with and if your army's not sort of up to it. So I think quite easy to rank in terms of, you know, how well each commander deals with each mutation. But I think not losing sight of the fact there are two other mutators as well as killbots definitely is factored into my ranking.
So what do you think, Pidgeot?
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and I think the commanders that will do really well this week are going to be those ones, as I said, in terms of being able to feed, but also having that quick mobility to deal with speed freaks at the same time. Because in combination with inspiration, that could get bad really fast. But if you have the mobility or a way to hold them, you'll do a lot better than the rest.
Okay, let's begin. Abathur, where do we have him?
Abathur's got like pretty decent answers to this mutator actually in general terms. Like he's got some good feeding choices. Probably want to start off feeding with Evo chambers, which are giving you like the Evo chamber kill and then the broodling kills from afterwards for the kill bots, and then transitioning into swarm hosts, which you're probably going to want to do to deal with the attack waves anyway as well. Once you've, you know, picked up some biomass, got some ultimate evolutions out, his clearing is pretty decent as well, to be honest, once he's powered up. So you've kind of got the advantage that with him you can deal with the kill bots and like quick clear at the same time. Similarly, like his sort of multi-lane defense, and also obviously using like I was using P2 when I tried this, like his multi-lane defense, particularly with deep tunnel, is pretty effective.
Okay, A tier. What do you think, Pidgeot?
Yeah, I agree with the majority of that, and the only reason I didn't even want to bump him to S tier is really because of his early game. I find with Abathur, getting that early Brutalisk is really important, and with this combination of mutations, it just gets a little bit harder. Definitely not impossible, but it will be quite a bit of a challenge. But I also know it doesn't impact the majority of players because they're not going to be getting that early Brutalist just by default. But as Joni said, I agree with pretty much everything there. His early ins be a bit slow, but it picks up once he gets a swarm host, gives him the ability to defend. He has mobility to get around. So I see him as a solid A tier.
Solid A. Okay, both of you agree with A. Let's put Abathur in A. Prestige-wise, second one.
Yeah, tunneling horror.
Yeah.
You guys are absolutely correct that Abathur doesn't really rampage in the early game of this map because of the rocks and the way the units are hidden behind there. But I think I agree that it does do pretty well afterwards. Let's put Abathur in A. Let's move on. Alarak, where do we have him?
So for Alarak, I personally see him as he does have the tools because he can teleport, especially if you're using P3 with the mothership to get around. He does have his turrets or cannon, if he needs to have just a little bit of a distraction to defend against speed freaks. And he has a really quick clear on this map, which I think is quite important, because once you get rid of once you're able to clear your lanes, and especially if you're able to clear all three, not just the ones that will be kind of on your side, dealing with kill bots becomes a lot easier. The one concern I really had with Alarak is that he doesn't really have a cheap unit, especially if you're going P3, to really get rid of the kill bots. But the solution for that, and with a lot of commanders, is just to use some probes or SCVs, drones, whatever it is, to feed
Pretty
those
much.
kill bots. Yeah, so given that, I personally put him in A tier.
Okay, what do you think, Joni?
Like Alarak's one of those commanders where if you look into the dark corners of the internet, you can find people that cleared like extremely quickly with Alarak. Like, but he's also one of those ones where there's a big difference between what's possible and what's like actually like manageable. And so yeah, I pretty much agree with everything Pidgeot said. Like he has the standard Protoss issue of not being able to feed particularly cost effectively. Alarak's destruction wave in and of itself is actually really, really useful for dealing with like speed freaks and inspiration in particular, just for kind of thinning out those waves a little bit. But in general terms, yeah, you want to clear as quickly as you can. And you're going to have to deal with feeding probes sort of in the meantime. But yeah, P3, I had him in B tier.
B tier. What do you think about B tier, PJ?
I can definitely see it, and I think one thing that would have me kind of move towards B tier is given that Alarak just kind of being that ultimate glass cannon, the more damage he takes, the more his army will die quickly. I think there is a bit more of a risk with him because of inspiration. So if it takes longer to kill the wave, he's just taking more damage, and then he could just get his army can get chipped away over time. So I'm comfortable with B tier.
Okay, B tier it is. Alarak B tier. Prestige twice. You want the third one, right?
Yeah, I would prefer P3. Yeah.
All right. Arcturus. Where do we have him?
So Mengsk is an interesting one for this mutator, well, for Killbots specifically, because although he can feel slightly like a Zerg commander, but feeding's not as sustainable for him as you'd expect it to be. Like looking at the sort of the Killbot wave timings, like by 1048 you're needing 20 supply for that wave, and then by 1418 that ramps up to 30 supply. And that becomes pretty unsustainable even for someone like Mengsk quite quickly. The good news is like 75 mandate Zerg cooldowns like clear aside pretty much. So you know you do have options there. But you are going to have to, like I think he's one where like feeding and clearing both at the same time and end up in like a bit of a compromise. I also noted that like contaminate strikes quite useful, like the inspiration sort of radius of effect is not massive. And so contaminate strikes quite useful for kind of breaking up the attack waves that can cluster around the hybrids a little bit. I had Arcturus in B to C.
B to C. What do you think, Vijayat?
Yeah, definitely agree with a lot of what you said there. What I find with Minx in this map is he deals with a lot of the mutations quite well. Killbot's obviously being the one that challenges him the most, but with his bunkers, he deals with speed freaks and inspiration quite easily. If he uses his ESOs, he can kind of full clear the map just over time if that's the route you want to take. The one difference I'll say is with Killbots, I think it's not as bad to deal with. Like to put him in C tier. I personally had him in A to B, was leaning more towards B, so I personally would say B. And the reason is with his like call downs for his free units, whether using the Zerglings, whether using the bunker itself just to empty them out if it's at the end, and the fact that his base laborers, base workers, before you upgrade them with their weapons, are still relatively cheap, like cheaper than most workers are for the rest of the commanders. I had him between A and B, but gravitating towards B just because there is still a bit more attention you have to put to it.
Okay, B tier for Arcturus. Third prestige, right?
P3 was the one I preferred, yeah.
All right, let's move on. Artanis, where do we have him?
So Artanis, I always feel like Blizzard just doesn't like him, but I feel like he's able to do this one, but he does struggle a lot more than some of the other commanders. When it comes to inspiration, if you're using P3 like with the Archons to try to deal with that wave plus push at the same time, you're only going to get so far just because of the timer on it. When it comes to dealing with Killbots, he doesn't really have a cheap way to deal with it. For him, I was personally using probes when I went through it for the most part, just to kind of get rid of them. And the only issue with using, and this applies to all commanders, using probes, drones, SCVs, is that you're going to have to protect them as they go in. So if there's coincidentally an attack wave, if you're going into the base, you just have to kind of accompany them. So for that, I put him actually between C and D. I personally had him in C tier. Yeah.
Okay. What do you think, Joni?
Yeah, I agree with a lot that was said. Like, Space Archons are great. They are going to be used heavily, and I'd probably towards using them pretty much exclusively in terms of using your top bar energy. Or really prioritizing Space Archons, because they're great against inspiration. They're great for helping you push. Like, they're just very, very useful for this mutation. The feeding issues kind of compounded by the inspiration and speed freaks in particular, I found on this, because you're going to need to keep like any melee wave or melee like part of a wave is going to close on your units really quickly. So there's a bit of a comp dependency here. So like, depending on what comp you go for, you are going to encounter like having to deal with speed freaks and inspiration as well. So I just kind of felt, although he's got like some decent options, particularly in terms of Space Archons, like none of them he's going to struggle as well. So I had him, C to D.
Okay, so both of you are okay with C or D, but I guess both of you are okay with C.
I think put him in C for now. I'd be interesting to see how that, if that changes as we go.
C would have been the greater answer. I was like, C? You said C. My Donnie. Anyway.
Yep.
Dehaka, where do we have him?
So Dehaka's like, he has got some options like primal and creeper hosts to feed, like primal hosts specifically, because stuff doesn't like get distracted and go and blow up somewhere else. It is a really good option. Like, clearing is pretty workable as well using pack leaders. I'd probably suggest using P3 for this, in order that you've got basically more firepower down multiple lanes at the same time. So using like one of the Dehakas and a pack leader, or two Dehakas in combination and then pack leaders down a lane, works pretty well. Once you've dealt with killbots on this, like Dehaka himself deals very well with inspiration and speed freaks. Like, he can deep tunnel, very, very mobile. Clumps of creeper hosts set up around the different lanes can sort you out very easily. And also, obviously, eating hybrids is a decent way to get rid of inspiration. So yeah, I was sort of erring towards P3. I think P2 is super doable. I had Dehaka in A tier.
A tier. What do you think, Pidgeot?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Actually, I have them in A tier as well. And one thing I would just also add out, especially for killbots in this case, is just be careful with the primal hosts, especially when they become creeper hosts. I found this out the hard way, where of course the primal hosts can feed with their locusts, but if they become explosive locusts, they won't count towards the kill count. So you just gotta, if you're gonna use those, just melee them around a little bit just so they take the attacks. So just something to keep in mind. But yeah, he has everything he needs. He gets rid of inspiration easily with consume, killbots. He can feed with zerglings until he gets his primal hosts or drones, like, because they cost the same. So he does have everything he needs to deal with it, and he has the mobility to get around. Especially if you're using P3, you'll have two Dehakas to kind of go around to the attack waves. So he has everything he needs, but nothing that really puts him over the top. So A tier was how I saw him.
Both of you are okay with A tier?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's put Dehaka in A tier. I personally would have said that, why would you even go for primal hosts? Because you can just clear the map before that even becomes a problem. I would just use pack eaters to clear one lane, and then the next lane, Glevic clears one lane. After that, Mervar clears another lane, and then you can just run down the last side to clear that. I don't even need to build a single primal host. I can just go straight into Mutalisks, Guardians, or Tyrannosaurs, whichever I prefer. But anyway, that's also a crap thing to do. You can also just go creep roast if you want to go slow about it. So yeah, still A tier. Let's move on. Fenix, where do you have him?
Phoenix was a fun one. So personally, I found that he's like the jack of all trades, master of none, similar to Raynor, where he can deal with inspiration. It does impact him more than other commanders, and by that I mean it's just he is more army based. He does have, of course, his hero unit, but it just takes a little bit longer to get rid of those. Kill bots, he can definitely feed, but similar to a lot of the commanders this week, you may want to just end up using your probes, or if you get your Robo Bay up early, you can actually feed with things like your observers because they're quite cheap as well. However, when it comes to just dealing with the speed freaks, like he also has his teleportation mechanic, so he can get around quite easily. So he has everything he needs, but nothing that really kind of helps negate them. It's just more dealing with the mutations. So does decent. I personally have him in B tier.
B tier. What do you think, Joni?
Yeah, I don't find anything fun about playing with Phoenix.
Are you feeling it now, Mr. Krabs? Are you feeling it?
So other than that, I completely agree with Pidgeot on this one. Like he's, typical Protoss problems around feeding, but other than that, generally, like, yeah, he's pretty good. He's got decent mobility. He can clear fast. Use P2, I suspect, for cheap additional units, etc. Yeah, had him in B tier as well.
B tier. Okay, I guess B tier is fine. Let's put Phoenix in B tier. Han and Horner, where do we have him?
So Han and Horner, like, their clearing is sort of relatively average, as is their feeding. And as Pidgeot said, like, with these sort of jack of all trades commanders, it creates a bit of a problem because you've got to figure out, like, where are you diverting your resources in terms of, are you putting money into feeding, clearing, whatever. The good news they've got is that if you put full mastery points into calling the fleet, that can do a really, really significant amount of damage to an entire lane, basically, if you put it in the right place. So that can help significantly with clearing. Mines are still very useful for, like, mopping up attack waves. Their mobility is not fantastic. Their galleons are obviously pretty slow moving, etc. But mag mines can do a significant amount of soak. I was looking at playing P1 partly because I always do, but I think you do want those additional mag mines in there just to sort of help mop stuff up. I had Han and Horner sort of C to D.
C to D. What do you think, Pidgeot?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. Personally, I go between P1 and P2 for a mutation like this, and it kind of ties into what you mentioned there regarding the fleet. So if you're using your fleet, like the air fleet travel distance, I think it was called, you'll be able to clear pretty much, not all, but almost all of a side once you get into the right position. The downside of that is you're now giving up your mag mines, and or like the cooldown for the mag mine, sorry. So depending on what play style you want to do, if you're going with P1, I would actually keep the Magmine cooldown, focus on that as like a form of mobility, because that's going to be important with this mutation. But if I'm going with P2, like Horner's units, I'll focus on, Horner's units as the mobility, so I can call them down where they're needed. I can use the Magmines as more of a defensive ability against the attack waves, just to make sure that I'm covered. So definitely can deal with it, but they do struggle because the inspiration is just harder for them to deal with than others. Feeding is a bit of a challenge for them, like they'll have to use their CVs, and speed freaks is harder again for them to deal with than others.
Interesting. I guess D tier is fine, not too far from where I put them, but I always thought that the fact they had salvage makes it a lot easier for both you and your ally to feed. Their concern for me is not killbots. It's just the map after killbots. I think you can clear just fine with Han and Horner, but I guess these where they end up. Let's move on. Karax, where do you have them?
Sorry, just tickle my throat. So for Karax, hopefully not as much of I know we had some concerns with him last week, but for this mutation, I do really like Karax as a commander on this map in general. He's definitely a fun one to have on Temple of the Past. However, he does struggle with this combination of mutations. Dealing with inspiration is one thing, whether you're turtling or trying to pump out like a military earlier, even just using your top downs. You'll be able to deal with it, but it'll take, depending on the prestige you choose to use, just a lot more energy or a lot more units to be built up to deal with it. Speed freaks you can deal with your units also and your top down, and especially if you know the timings. However, kill bots is going to be similar to a lot of the other commanders, an issue in terms of just feeding. His units are quite expensive. So if you're going to be relying on your drone or your probes, that just also sets back your economy. But once you're set up, of course, you can just try to mass them out. But it is something that he does have to deal with. And of course, having to push into the kill bots will just be a bit more challenging for him if he's turtling. So as much as I do like Karax, I do think he struggles quite a bit at him between C and D, actually.
Okay, what do you think, Joni?
Yeah, he's just not got a good answer to kill bots, and clearing with him is not as quick as you'd want either. Like I think it is, as with a lot of the lower ranked commanders, like he's got that real balance of like economy wise, sort of clearing and feeding at the same time. So I had him in E tier. I cannot see him having like an easy time with this at all.
What do you think about E tier, Pidgeot?
I understand the logic behind it, but I found that this mutation was easy enough where I couldn't justify putting anyone in E tier, because to me that just means completely unusable. But I guess it just depends on our definition of E tier for this mutation. So I definitely see him as transparently my worst commander for the week, but it's one of those things where to not opposed to it is just I think how we want to define that tier.
Okay, if you're not opposed to E, that's where I'll put him. I don't think he's E bad personally, but I guess that highlights how bad he is. 2-2 and die took 2 attempts, by the way. We did 2 attempts with Artanis and Karax, so you're not too far off. Let's move on. Let's move on. Kerrigan, where do we have him?
So Kerrigan's right at the other end of the spectrum for me. Like she's got really good options for feeding, you know, eBays into like eBays, well, and cheaplings as well. You know, if she wants to, obviously free Nidus worms are completely free, and you know, brood lords. But the reality is, you'll have cleared by that point anyway. You know, she's got a seriously powerful hero unit that doesn't really have a power ramp. So, like, particularly when compared to, you know, Dehaka, Abathur, etc., like Kerrigan sort of spawns at the 4-minute mark, like fully formed, basically. So, yeah, P0 is very, very quick for clearing structures, like, but I think 0, 2, or 3 are all pretty viable for this, dependent on your preferred playstyle, basically. But yeah, I also think that her power continues well into like the later stages of this game. Obviously, super mobile with Nidus worms as well. I had her S to A.
S to A. What do you think, Pidgeot?
Yeah, I agree. Definitely use any prestige minus prestige P1, just because you definitely want the Omega and Nidus network. And the reason is those actually count towards the killbot count. So if you're panicking for whatever reason and you have a whole bunch of networks built up, you can just kind of spam around it to one, stall for time.
Hold them! How long do you need? As long as you can give me.
And to feed them as well. So that's just a big plus that she has. She also deals with speed freaks and inspiration quite well. Her as a champ, as a commander, like a hero unit, will be able to deal with those quite easily. And with the mobility that Kerrigan just innately brings, she'll be all around the map. And of course, she can take her Zerglings and all other units with her quite easily. So she has everything she needs to do really well in this mutation. I know she in terms, the only challenge I think she'll have is the timing for inspiration, but that's a very,
also
very
air.
limited.
That's not her only. Also air units. That's her other challenge.
Air units, yeah. Yeah, but that's where you'll hopefully at that point be able to just bring out a whole bunch of Hydras to help deal with that, or
No,
Mutas
they
if you really
suck.
want to. But
They suck too.
yeah, I don't know. I feel like she still has the ability to deal with air on this map. Like I haven't had too many issues with it. Of course, her ground game is a lot stronger. Not denying that, but I don't
Yes.
feel like her air is the weakest thing in the world. It's just definitely not as good as some of the other commanders. But given the mutations and what she brings to it, I actually agree with S and A. I personally had her in A tier just because, to your point, she will just do worse against those air comps. So.
All right. So both of you are okay with S, right? Right?
I'm leaning towards A,
Yeah.
considering who I have in S, but I'm okay with like what will probably be bottom of S.
Okay. Both of you are okay with S. Let's put her in S. I personally had her in A because, like I said, air is an issue. Anyway, let's move on. Nova, where do we have him?
So let's bring it up. So for Nova, big fan of the commander, but she does definitely have her issues this week. Similar to a lot of others, she's going to have to feed with her SCVs at the beginning just to kind of get, because her units are notoriously expensive. However, Nova is still strong in terms of, especially if you're using something like P3 or Soldier of Fortune. Both are, I think, valid options this week. If you're going with P3, you can still clear a lot of the map. You're just going to have to be careful with inspiration, because once those waves spawn and you're trying to deal with the hybrid, you may not be able to one-shot them with your snipe. So at that point, it'll just like you won't be able to reset as easily. So where her army moves with her, I actually preferred using her bio army this time because of just the number of units for kill bots, even though I don't want to ideally feed with them, but it's just one of those things that just for comfort. But she does have a bit of troubles with that. The plus side is she does deal with speed freaks well with her mobility, and she also has some defensive units like her siege tanks as a couple examples, just to deal with those in case you want to just have more of a static defense at home while she's out. But so she does have her issues this week, so that's C tier.
C tier? I guess that's what happens when you use her bio units. What do you think, Joni?
Yeah, I mean P3 is great for clearing. Like, you are going to clear quickly with P3, which is a good thing because she has like the same terrible feeding options that all sort of Terran and Protoss commanders end up with. The advantage she's got when clearing is that P3 can just get on with it. Like, she's not aggroing kill bots. Which, as we'll find with later commanders, like can be actually a real nuisance and can really slow down your clearing if you just get unlucky with the lanes the killbots are spawning in. Having said that, like trying to clear and feed and defend all at the same time is quite a lot. Like, I was torn between where you'd want to put her mastery points in terms of her prestige, because you've got that trade-off between her sort of bombing run and her nuke as well. So like I think that while she does have tools, not necessarily the easiest to use. So I had her sort of, I actually had her in C tier as well.
Okay, both of you guys put her in C tier. Let's put her in C tier. I personally had her in A tier. Come on, guys. Defensive drone that will keep you alive. Defensive drone! Airstrikes to just clear everything. Anyway, you guys put her in C tier. Let's put her in C tier.
I think it all gets very expensive, I think, when you start doing that, and like mechanically quite. I do agree with you that like defensive drone is a good tool, and like particularly the radar, the Raven sort of healing drones and stuff are useful as well.
Yeah.
But like I think it does get quite expensive quite quickly.
It doesn't get expensive if you don't have to feed. If you've cleared early from this, if you've cleared nice and early, I guess it does get expensive if you don't clear and you spend more than 10 minutes having to feed. Anyway, let's just move on.
Yeah.
Raynor, where do we have him?
So Raynor has, again, like Terran commander problems, but like he has got top bars to clear, which are pretty useful. you are probably going to want to try and do as cheesy as stuff as possible by spawn camping with spider mines. Again, as with a lot of these commanders, like feeding and clearing at the same time could get pretty expensive. So you're going to want to really like maximize the impact of those sort of top bars. I reckoned P0 was going to be the best option. Like, you are going to need to be getting some bio out at some point, I reckon, because I don't think that you're going to have necessarily enough pushing power early on if you tried going sort of P3. So I had Raynor in D tier. Admittedly, I am by far the best player in the world with him. But,
By far.
I didn't. Yeah. I will absolutely see that point, but like, I sort of didn't see Raynor having any like easy options out on this one.
What do you think, PJyot?
So usually, as much as his mech comps are funner to play, I would say his bios does work a little in terms of kill bots. It does help quite a bit because his Marines will feed just as well as his SCVs, but it's just a lot easier to deal with. In terms of inspiration and speed freaks, he can turtle up. Again, he's one of those jack of all trade commanders, but so he can turtle up with his bunkers, which are strong, and he doesn't necessarily have to worry as much about speed freaks or inspiration. It is, again, like most commanders, dealing with kill bots. I do use him for this mutation. I would recommend using P0 as well. But in C tier, so he does have the kit to deal with it. His Marines, like, they're very easy to amass, so feeding that into kill bots isn't as much of a issue as some of the other commanders. So he does definitely get impacted, but surprisingly just not as much of the ones that we had below him so far. So I personally had him in C tier.
What do you think about C tier, Joni?
I'm perfectly happy with that. I'm like a single digit APM player. Pidgeot knows better than me on this one.
Okay. You know who knows better than all of us on Raynor?
Lila.
Raynor?
Yeah.
You should see what Lila did. He took his expansion, but he didn't break the rocks. He sent his first Marines down at the very end of the lanes just to get vision, and his first Duskwings is used to clear the southeast lane. He completely cleared it.
Those like clearing backwards.
The first Duskwings, and then the second top bar, the Hyperion, he used that to clear the southwest lane, where he was rallying Marines straight to the southwest lane. Like, he had like 10 Marines by the time he had the first Hyperion, and they just dropped the point defense drones so that the Marines won't take damage from the cannons. And meanwhile the Marines are all dealing damage. And then that basically just left one lane. My lane. So I was the one who was feeding his the entire time as Artanis.
Let's take this along.
Very fun, right?
Yeah, Raynor's top downs on this map do quite well, so it's quite interesting to see how much that they were pushed in that example. I might have to give that a shot with the Duskwings at the bottom.
Also, one more thing, we got ground. So Lila just camped with spider mines. All 3 lanes he camped with spider mines. So like, I was just sitting around waiting for the map to end. all I had to do was fight the lone scout here or there and the thrashers. I didn't even fight the thrashers. He kept them with spider mines also. So like,
I think I know what I'm trying this week.
Believe me, I tried it. I tried Raynor many times. Ask Cage, ask Ankalagan, I tried Raynor many times. People like us will not be able to do that. Also, you need luck of the draw, because every time I tried Raynor, we got air.
I feel like we're just gonna go into a custom game after this and give it a go.
Anyway, Raynor is basically, do you get air? He's A tier.
Huh?
Do you get anything other than air? He's E tier. So that round to both of you said C?
Yeah, I'm perfectly happy. Yeah.
That's about for maybe D. I think he's more closer to D than C, but considering who we have in C, not Nova. Nova's A, but you put him in C. Anyway, let's move on. Setboy, where do we have him?
All right. So for Stetmann, I think he has the tools to deal with this. So again, mobility is important, which Gary and Super Gary have quite a lot of. Your stat zones will give you that mobility and healing, which you're going to need a lot more in theory for this mutation. Healing will help you deal with any of the chip damage or those heroic units if they're giving you any issues, while obviously speed just lets you get all around the map. While giving you the ability to also teleport. So he has everything he needs, and he's a very fast clear if you get out on early Super Gary, especially if you're playing with Best Buddy. So he has the tools he needs, and he also has Zerglings that he also gets free units back. So in those two combinations together really help him deal with kill bots. Now he doesn't clear as fast as everyone else, so I think that's the only thing that can hold him back, even though it is still quite quick. But I think he still had enough to put him actually in S tier.
What do you think, Joni?
Yeah, pretty much agreed with all of that. I think he does clear pretty well. Like when you start flooding lanes with sort of Lings and Super Gary, like he does clear pretty well, and you have the advantage that you can basically feed and clear at the same time. You're not, his units are so cheap, you're not having to worry about them sort of being like running into a killbot on the way down the lane. The other thing that Stetmann has on this map in particular, because of the way that the lanes are structured, so like the enemy waves are specifically sort of funneled into bottlenecks, is like his infestors are absolutely superb. Like you can properly go sort of, Stukov P3 style on this. And basically that gives you the option to like clear at your own pace. Basically, like it's a pretty relaxed play style that you can adopt, which I'm always a big fan of. So I think he generally has like a pretty chilled out time on this. Yeah, I had him in S tier.
Okay, both of you had him in S. Let's put him in S. Second prestige, right?
Yes.
All right. Stukov, where do we have him?
So, annoyingly from my point of view, because it's sort of a boring play style, but it is what it is. Like Stukov P3 does, has the obvious advantage against killbots in the sense that feeding is completely free. Having said that, like Stukov P3 does encounter other issues on this mutation. So the combination of inspiration and speed freaks gives the hybrid like a lot more armor, and it also gives the inspired units significantly better like attack speed and movement speed. That means that their ability to deal with like Stukov's sort of waves is significantly better actually. So like not necessarily to the extent that it's going to be like a game breaking problem, but it can be a problem. In addition to that, his ability to deal with like multiple different lanes at once, particularly if you are playing P3 with him, is pretty much non-existent. So like, yeah, despite the fact he doesn't really need to worry about fast clearing, you're probably going to want to, and he still then has the issues on this map of dealing with like inspire and speeded up attack waves and stuff. So I had him sort of A to B, probably the lower end of that being mechanically my fault, but I don't think he's S tier on this, put it that way.
Okay, what do you think, Pijayot?
Yeah, I think my gut reaction wanted to put him in S, and then the more I thought about it, I actually went to A. So I do have him in A tier personally. The one thing I would call out that you had shared there is when you're using especially P3, and of course you're telling them like with the signal where to go, there's nothing stopping us from like control clicking everything on this screen. Like if you just control click, let's say your Marines on a part of a screen and just move them to the other lane.
Yeah.
So if you're being attacked by two lanes at once, you can still manually move them. It's just an extra step, which I know I'm not a fan of myself, but it's still something that you can easily do, especially with kill bots. You can still feed them quite easily. But I think what stopped me from putting him in S tier was more inspiration than it was kill bots. And the reason is just pushing into it. Once you hit critical mass, it's not going to be as much of an issue. But that early and mid game, it's just more of an issue for him to deal with than I would like for an S tier commander. So he's able to deal with it, but until he gets like enough bunkers or barracks out just to deal with those first couple waves, because you also want to clear at the same time, it just gives that early game a little bit of like it's just going to be a little uncertain in terms of how fast can you push versus. Personally, yeah, I do agree with P3, but I put that in A tier.
A tier. Okay, I guess both of you are okay with A tier. Let's put Stukov in A tier. Third prestige, right?
P3, yeah.
Though, now that I think about it, there's probably nothing wrong with going with the first prestige and just using infrastructure to feed.
Yeah, so I wondered this. I haven't had time to try it, and I haven't been able to find. I haven't had time to look, if I'm being honest, to find videos of anyone doing it. But like in theory, P1 would clear pretty quickly. Like P1
Not
does
only
pack
clear,
a punch.
they all can also defend more effectively because you can just detunnel their siege tanks.
Yeah,
wherever you need them to
tanks
be.
exactly.
And
Yeah, so
backs.
like I'd really love to either experiment myself or see someone doing a like.
Let's move on. Tychus, where do we have him?
Perfect. So for Tychus, sounding like a broken record, the main thing with Tychus is obviously feeding kill bots is going to be his biggest issue. So you're going to have to really rely on your SCVs initially just to kind of help clear that. But in terms of speed freaks and inspiration, Tychus doesn't have too much issues dealing with that, especially if you're using something like Lone Wolf, where you can kind of clear the lanes quite quickly, basically spawn camp stuff as they spawn, whether the waves or the objectives. So you're pretty comfortable. The only thing you'll just need to keep in mind as well is just defending at home. So keep one of your guys at home. It definitely has the tools to deal with it, but nothing that makes them extra strong and nothing that really I guess eliminates the mutations, just more of a dealing with it. So I had him between A and B, but personally I had him in B tier.
What do you think, Joni?
Yeah, I agree with the reasonable amount that's been said. I think like Tychus is the classic example of like feeding bad, clearing good. If you are clearing a wave and a killbot spawns in the same lane, sorry, if you're clearing a lane and a killbot spawns in the same lane, it's a massive pain with speed freaks because de-aggroing that killbot is you're just not going to get away from it. So you're either going to have to burn. You're either going to have to burn a medivac pickup, which is a nuisance. Yeah, it's just like he deals with everything else on this mutation like very, very easily, including like the map itself. But it's killbots and quick clearing that's the nuisance. So it's like super doable. But it's like it's just a nuisance. So yeah, I had him in B tier. He's fine, but he's runs into problems.
B tier. I guess both of you have him in B tier. Let's put Tychus in B. Wait, hold on. We skipped Swann. Oh my Donnie.
Yeah.
Swann. Where do we have him?
There's a reason you forgot him this week.
I apologize, Swann.
Yeah, like Swann has a bit of a rough ride this week, I think.
Rough ride. That's Raynor's prestige.
Yeah,
I get
so,
it.
he certainly has a rougher ride than Raynor does this week. But I mean, he's basically Terran Karax to all intents and purposes. But I personally think he's got slightly better clearing. Like I think his, pulse cannon warbots, throwing some wraiths in there as well, which are very good against inspiration as well. Like, he is going to clear stuff, but in the sort of intervening period, like he has a bit of a rough time. Concentrated beam is brilliant for clearing lanes because it is a straight line, exactly the same as the lane itself. Sorry, for not clearing lanes, for helping clear waves. But like, yeah, he is still going to have a bit of a rough time. I had like P0 or P2, dependent on whether you want, the extra defense or the slightly sort of punchier top bars or quicker top bars. But yeah, I had him sort of D to E.
D to E. What do you think, PJyot?
Yeah, I agree with all of that actually. So I had him personally at D. I had him just above Karax, so I put him in D tier in my case, but definitely open to E if we're keeping him with Karax there. He does do slightly better just because his defensive structures are quite strong as well, but the difference between him and a Karax is just his units are a bit cheaper, so he can pull them out. Like that's like his race specifically. You can use that. That gives him a slight edge. Really depending on his cooldowns, I think are quite important. And P0 and P2, I think, are the way to go, especially using the beam width and damage to clear waves and part of the lane, I guess, if you haven't used it there just yet. So same issues with Karax. I'd have him in the I guess D or E tier as well. Like wherever we have Karax, I'd put him there.
Really? So you're saying Swann has same issues as someone who has Unity Barrier and Repair Beam? Interesting.
Yeah, so I wonder whether he is actually D tier instead of E tier, because I had him like marginally like he's definitely bottom of D tier, but like I do think he is like a tier. I think Karax is just a tier worse than anyone else this week, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm like in agreement with that.
So where are we putting him? D tier?
I think D tier for me.
I don't know, guys.
Yeah.
We're gonna put him in D tier.
Like
Personally, I have him in like at least C tier because he can clear pretty fast, so he doesn't have to feed a lot. And once he's cleared, he has amazing top bars. Concentrated being pulse cannon, that'll clear almost anything, and your rates will mop up the rest. And you still have the basic laser drill. Okay.
Yeah, I don't. The laser drill doesn't. Laser drill doesn't add a massive amount of value from my point of view this week. I mean, it does what it does, but it kind of does. I wouldn't say it does anything above what it normally does. Like, I think the big difficulty is that pulse cannon's quite slow to recharge, and I think that massively helps his clearing of the bases.
If you don't like top bars, you can always use the first prestige to just slow down everything. That you completely negate speed freaks. And if you don't have to fight the units because you have the factories giving you vision for the laser drill, nothing ever comes to your base and you don't ever have to deal with inspiration. So all you have to do is just clear the buildings to finish off the kill bots.
Yeah, so I haven't tried. I haven't tried P1 on this.
Yeah,
I don't know if it slows them down.
We already put Swann in D tier. Yeah, it's fine. We already put Swann in D tier. Let's keep him there. Because it's your tier list, not mine. Let's move on. Vorazun, where do we have him?
Sorry, I've lost track. Whose turn was it?
Vorazun. Oh, wait.
It's on you.
Joni.
Oh, it's on me. All right. Sorry, me or Joni? I lost track there.
Joni, let's go, Joni.
Okay.
Sure, I'll go. So, yeah. Vorazun, I didn't reckon had a huge amount going for her. Like, time stop, as ever, is very useful. But standard Protoss, her feeding's not great. Obviously she's got massively high DPS ground units, so her clearing in theory is good. Same issue as a lot of the commanders, though, in the sense that like speed freaked kill bots are not going to de-aggro from like DTs or something like that. The fact their detectors can massively salt her game as well. So like I think clearing is going to be, doable with time stop, but interesting. Her ability to deal with air comps is, as always, like just not good at all. Like if you're hitting an air comp on this, then you are going to have more trouble. Yeah. So I had her sort of like C to D.
C to D. What do you think, Pijayot?
Similar ranking for me. I do have her at C tier. She does have a few things to deal with speed freaks, like you can use your dark pylons to stealth or use buildings around it if it's a ground comp to kind of at least distract them for a while. She has mobility with those same dark pylons, and of course when it comes to kill bots, that's going to be her biggest issue. Like most commanders this week, it's just the feeding them with her probes is going to be her best bet, but it's just not the easiest thing to do, especially when her army is expensive for what it is. I guess I'll put it that way. It's not the strongest in terms of pushing or when you're putting it out there. So she does have some issues with this one. Is it doable? Sure, but she definitely struggles. So I do have her in C tier.
Okay. Both of you have her in C tier. Let's put her in C tier. She has one prestige. Third one.
P3.
Yes. Yep. Zagara, where do we have him?
So I'm actually happy with Zagara this week, because in the last week I was a little bit sad of where she had to landed, but this week I have her as one of the stronger commanders. She easily deals with everything when it comes to inspiration. Just her natural pushing power, whether using P1 or P3, will push through quite well. I personally like P1 in this instance, just because I like that constant stream to deal with kill bots as well, and also just helps naturally with speed freaks, because you're going to have just a lot of units just naturally spawning in your base and easy to kind of move around. So for me, the mass zerglings will deal with the kill bots just passively while they're also moving to clear the lanes quite quickly as well. So I think she has one of the faster clear times for that. So all in all, I found her to be an easy S tier for me this week.
What do you think, Joni?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think P1 is the way to go this week. Like, I think this is such a quick, clear map that you're not going to run out of, like P1. It's one of those prestiges that like can potentially run out of steam, particularly when you've got like a mutator that affects your economy, like
Swim
Killbots
pickings.
sort of
Killbots
does.
Yes, that too. Yeah.
Yeah, like any of them, but Killbots sort of effectively affect your economy, and I think that like P1 can run out of steam, but on this particular mutation, I don't think it does. So I think P1 is the way to go. And like Pidgeot says, like she's basically got decent answers to everything. So I had her an S tier.
All right, both of you have an S tier. Let's put an S tier. First prestige. Let's move on. Zeratul, where do we have him?
Yeah, so Zeratul's an interesting one this week. I found like cannons are good and shade projections are useful, particularly against like buffering, buffering against speed freaks, buffering against inspiration and stuff. There is the natural ramp in getting cannons up and running in terms of you need to get the 2 artifact pieces prior to them sort of properly like coming online. Obviously, Zeratul himself is a very good unit. He's extremely mobile. You've got the Void Prisms that you can use to, or his Warp Prisms that you can use to sort of bamf around the map pretty happily. There was a temptation when I was looking at this to try P3 to try and get that like really quick clear in, but the difficulty is I think the power drops off so quickly on P3 that it doesn't really become viable. Like this is quite a long map by default, so like I think you're better off playing with P2. I think probably you are going to want to use cannons for defense. You can feed with probes whilst you're clearing, etc. So, and obviously like Telbrus Legion themselves are pretty useful. A for clearing, B for a bit of feeding. Like they're not free units, but they are like unit by unit quite cheap. So yeah, I think Zeratul's like not gonna have the easiest of times for him this week. I do think he's like still pretty well equipped to deal with it. I had him A to B.
A to B. What do you think, Pidgeot?
Yeah, I agree with the majority of that. The only thing I would consider if you're still using P3 is faster clears just helps deal with killbots passively as well, just because it'll be just easier to deal with. So I'm not completely opposed to using it, because a faster clear early on with a mutation like this just makes it easier to deal with for the latter half of the mission. So definitely not opposed to that. Similar to a lot of the other units, though, since his army's a bit more expensive, you're probably going to be using probes to feed in for quite a bit. But he also has the tools to deal with the
Zeratools, hey!
The Zeratools, there you go. So he's got the Zeratools to deal with, like with using his cannons, using his like the monolithic Tesseract, just to kind of clear out if he wants to be a bit more defensive once he has pushed. So he definitely has the tools, but it's also just not the same tools as the people I would have above him, or not as bad as the people below him. So he definitely does good, and he's just Zeratul, so he's naturally strong. So I did have him in a B tier.
Okay. So Zeratul goes in B. Prestige-wise, second one? Or even no prestige should be fine. I think you guys are overestimating how big of a problem killbots are to commanders who have good clearing power. If you have good clearing power, you shouldn't be too worried about killbots. The main concern for me is after you clear the kill bots, inspiration can still make the enemy stronger, especially if you're up against immortals, which can present a problem to Zeratul's cadence. That's why I wasn't adamantly defending guys like Swann, because their static defense will still have an issue with immortals, even without inspiration. And with inspiration, that'll make it even tougher. That's why I didn't really lobby for Swann being higher, or Zeratul. But that being said, Zeratul is a demote dude. That will cancel a lot of what inspiration does, just by virtue of making the units weaker. I think it's still fine, but I would say that he's at least A. Anyway, do we have a double S?
So just a quick pause. Are you streaming just so we can see the final tier list? Just because
No, I don't think so.
All right,
I
top of
don't
S.
believe so.
Top of S.
So
Go ahead.
I think like Zagara is the obvious choice.
All right.
But I don't know. I like Stetmann is a pretty relaxed game. Like as someone who likes a chilled out mutation, like Stetmann is pretty good and pretty consistent. I think there is probably a parity between those two commanders, but I don't think put it this way, I don't think Zagara is like very, very obviously significantly better than Stetmann.
Okay.
Yeah, I do see it in that order. Zagara, Stetmann, Kerrigan.
Who's top of A?
I think Dehaka's pretty bulletproof on this one, really. Yeah, I think
He probably eats the bullets too.
Tychus. Yeah, exactly. Just the ability to chomp stuff. Like,
wish I could eat the kill bots though.
Well, there is that. That would be. It's pretty much the only
Second
thing
A.
you can't eat.
Yeah. Second and A.
Yeah.
I think.
I see Abathur as second, and then Stukov.
All right.
The order it's currently in.
All right. Top of B.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. Probably Zeratul.
We're saying Alarak's better than Nova for this week. Oh my Donnie. Oh my Donnie.
Even a broken clock is right twice a day. It could happen.
Who's next in B?
I personally see Minsk.
Then,
and then I went Phoenix, Alarak, Tychus. So that was the order I saw it in.
All right, who's top of C?
I'm happy with that. So Nova's going to be top of C, otherwise we won't hear the end of it.
No, even if you do that, you will not hear the end of it. D, but... Believe me, after this call, you will not hear the end of it.
I think we put her too high. I think we should move her down to D. There we go. That's better.
And then who's next?
I probably Artanis actually. Like maybe Vorazun or Artanis, and then possibly I don't know. I think it probably much of a muchness at that stage, to be honest. But I think like.
I agree with the order it's currently in, but after the story we heard from Raynor, I could see Raynor being like higher in C, but honestly, the order I see it in right now, I think is what I would normally do.
All right. Who's top of D?
I would say Han and Horner.
All right, and then the Karax and E. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for watching. If you have an idea for what else, please leave it in the comment. I'll see you guys next time.